Hey guys, this is Mike Mahaffey, the old bastard BJJ guy, here for BJJ Mental Models. Back in my day, we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to the academy just to learn some crappy technique from a random purple belt. You kids have it so easy because now you can just subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium and get tons of great audio courses to learn new techniques, enhance your mindset, and entertain yourself. You can even get personalized rolling reviews from some of your favorite BJJ Mental Models coaches, including me. It's like having your own seminar, you spoiled little whippersnappers. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium right now, get off my lawn, and go train.
Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 331. I'm Steve Kwan. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach. This is not an episode on our regular release schedule. This is actually a somewhat urgent bonus episode because I am joined here today with friend of the show, Stephan Kesting from Grapple Arts and Essential Wilderness. Stephan, how's it going, my friend?
Steve, I'm glad that we can talk today because we have to get the message out. This is so important that it's pretty much worth an emergency. I wouldn't call this a bonus episode. I would call this an emergency episode.
Okay, interesting. An emergency episode. Well, we don't do a lot of those, but I'm definitely eager to dig into the topic. As always, though, Stephan, of course, my most sincere thanks for coming by the podcast. You know, I always love to have you on as a guest. You've been very inspirational to my jiu-jitsu journey. So anything that you want to say about jiu-jitsu is something that I definitely want to listen to and I want a platform. So tell me what's up, buddy. What's the topic of the episode today?
Yeah. Well, people do say that I have the best opinions on jiu-jitsu. You know, that's just what they say. But here's the thing. For years, I've stayed silent. I've stayed quiet when people started doing collar sleeve guard. And then I stayed silent when people started doing spider guard and grabbing the sleeves and wrapping people up with the material. And now it's just gone too far. I've stayed silent too long. We need to ban lapel guard in this sport immediately. We cannot wait. It is ruining jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is becoming unrecognizable, and it's because of the lapel guard. And there's a strong argument for banning things like spider guard as well. But lapel guard, for sure, has to go, and has to go right now.
Huh, interesting. That's not the topic I thought you were going to discuss here today. I mean, of course, lapel guard, I'm not a lapel player, but I definitely see a bit of it here and there in my training.
Yeah, but it's coming for you. You may not be interested in it, but it is coming for you. And just people training it around you. The next thing you know, you're going to start thinking, oh, well, you know, maybe it's okay if I just do a little bit of lapel guard. Maybe it's okay if I just take the lapel and, you know, pass it through the legs to get a handle when somebody's passing your guard. And then next thing you know, without even realizing it, you're going to be a full-on lapel guard player. It's part of the indoctrination process. And it's not a valid position. It's cheap and it's unfair. And you never had this traditionally. Traditional BJJ does not have this. And worst of all, absolutely worst of all, it's a totally woke position.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I think there was a problem with my audio. It sounded like you just said lapel guard is a woke position.
It is a woke position. I mean, it's a cheat code, and it allows smaller, weaker, and less athletic people to hold their own against bigger, stronger, more athletic athletes. It allows the betas to have a chance against the alphas. And that is contrary to nature. And if there's one definition of woke, it's going contrary to nature. I mean, it allows people to win by fabric instead of merit, by grips instead of athleticism, and by sneaky technique instead of just being stronger and more dominant and just crushing the smaller person.
Okay. I mean, Stephan, longtime inspiration to me. Of course, I love all of your material. I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done in the jiu-jitsu community, both inside jiu-jitsu, relating to the sport itself, but also advocacy for things like science and standing up against misinformation and disinformation. But I got to say, man, as thankful as I am for everything you've done, I'm kind of confused about this one. You think lapel guard is woke and it needs to be banned? I don't quite, like, where's your evidence for this? Where is this coming from? I've never heard anyone make this claim before.
Well, one excellent piece of evidence is with your own eyes. You can think of 2 or 3 anecdotes at least where some white belt or blue belt has taken your lapel and wrapped it around your leg or wrapped it around your arm and then wrapped it around your neck and stopped you from passing their guard. And they've denied you the win that you're entitled to because, you're entitled to wins for a number of different reasons. Number one, there's physical dominance. Are you more, we'll call it alpha. Are you bigger? Are you stronger? Are you faster? Are you more explosive? But then there's also the wins that you're entitled to because of hierarchy. You are a black belt, and they are a white belt or blue belt. And this is upending the natural hierarchy of nature. I mean, lobsters have hierarchies. Jiu-Jitsu gyms have hierarchies. Hierarchies are normal. Hierarchies are natural. Dare I even say good? I'm going to get canceled for sure for calling hierarchy good, but it's simply the case. I mean, lobsters are good to eat, and hierarchies are good in the nature, and hierarchies are good in the gym. And has this been studied? Yes, I'm a science guy. As you correctly point out, there's a ton of other data to support this. I mean, it's been discussed in dozens of podcasts. And if that's not conclusive proof that something like the lapel guard is a garbage position, then I don't know what is. I mean, yeah, of course, when I train in the gi, I have a lapel. So I clearly have nothing against lapels, but I'm just following the data. I'm a lapel realist, you might say.
Okay, well, again, Stephan, thank you so much for sharing this very unique perspective here. And I will admit that I have had experiences similar to what you've discussed where, I go into the gym in my athletic prime, ready to dominate, and some tiny little accountant ties me up with my own lapels, and now I can't move. And I agree that sometimes that doesn't really feel like it's in the spirit of jiu-jitsu, but I mean, it is a valid part of the game, right? People do this at the IBJJF levels, even at world championship levels. I mean, how do we square this away with saying that lapel guard is woke and needs to be banned when it's so heavily endorsed by the major organization that runs our tournaments?
Well, that's the key thing, isn't it? You're that's a circular argument. We're talking about the IBJJF. I'm not afraid of them. I'll name them, but they are in control of our sport. And now you're citing evidence from the sport that they're in control of to prove your point about how the IBJJF is producing. It's a circular argument. I mean, the IBJJF has an agenda. It's trying to mandate lapel usage, and it's trying to force it to our divisions. And even if you're not a lapel guy, it's still, like I said earlier, it's beginning to creep into your consciousness. You're thinking about it, and you're thinking, that seems pretty effective and kind of cool. Maybe I should try it. And then maybe you try it. Maybe you just get together with one friend and you try it in private in a garage gym somewhere. And it works for you because it's allowed and because it's been inculcated into your brain. And then before you know it, people who would never ordinarily have been lapel guard players turn into lapel guard players. So I don't think you can cite the IBJJF, the data coming from IBJJF, as evidence for anything. We can't trust any of that data. We have to trust things like podcasts, and we have to trust, just think of how it felt when that little accountant wrapped you up when you were trying to blast past their guard with a super fast Toriando or a knee cut. When you knee cut right up the body so that they basically get worried about you slamming, the
castration pass.
The castration pass, right? Because you can actually hit, people think the castration pass is just for going for the groin. But at a high level, you can actually do a triple bounce, right? You can do a triple attack. You can bounce off the groin, slam into the xiphoid process. And I've never personally broken off that bone and sent into the heart, but it's possible. I heard about it. And then you can also clip them in the chin. So they're trying to stop this. And it's not like, okay, the paths I just described, yes, it's dangerous. But if you don't like danger, if you don't like the risk of injury, get out of jiu-jitsu, first of all. You know, there's another way that we're emasculating the sport. So we can say, yeah, sure, it's not the safest thing in the world, but you know what? The safety effects, the long-term safety effects of lapel guard have not been studied either. Show me one good study done by somebody who's not an IBJJF shill showing me that the lapel guard is safe to do long-term. And, I'll point to another study or I'll point to another podcast immediately to counteract your data.
I mean, I'm not as scientific as you, Stephan. I don't have the same background. So to some extent, I'm just going to have to trust you and your opinion on this. But I do thank you for sharing this unique perspective. And I will say from my own personal perspective, as someone who is an older guy, has been training jiu-jitsu for a long time, I do sometimes struggle with all of these new positions and names that we're supposed to recognize. I mean, when I came up in jiu-jitsu, there were only two guards, right? There was open guard and there was closed guard. And now these lapel people, they expect me to know all of these new fancy names like worm guard and squid guard and squib guard. And man, I just can't keep track of all of that. I think there is an argument to be made that maybe we should simplify the sport back down to kind of its original focus. But I mean, in terms of calling lapel guard.
Yeah, we don't want to let this diversity thing get out of control, right? There were the good old days where there were two forms of guard. And you knew exactly what kind of guard you were facing. You know, that was the good old days. And now you've got all these, different styles of guard, upside down, inside out, caterpillar guard, octopus guard, squid guard. And you've got all these divisions and you've got all these different competition formats and different rules. I mean, it was good in the old days when you just wear the bad boy shorts and no rash guard, and that would just allow this tremendous amount of sweat to gather, and it really highlighted and it allowed for the expression of athleticism. And some guys, it wasn't, this isn't ageism, because I remember there were like 45, 50-year-old guys who were incredibly jacked, like veins on top of their veins. And, so clearly no-gi jiu-jitsu without a rash guard certainly helped them raise their testosterone levels. And how can you assess somebody's testosterone levels if they're all covered in a gi? Now, yes, I'm not anti the gi. Like I said, I personally have nothing against the gi. Many of my best friends wear gis. That's okay. If that's what you're into, cool. Just keep it out of jiu-jitsu.
Well, but Stephan, and again, thank you for being willing to speak up about this very unique perspective here, but there's a lot of options for people who don't want to do lapel guard. I mean, if you really are that anti-lapel, you can just go to CJI or ADCC or any of the no-gi divisions. I mean, no one is forcing you to play this position. So I'm a bit confused about why this is a hill that we need to die on here. I mean, why can't people who hate lapel guard just go into one of these other divisions and just participate there and not worry about this at all?
Well, you never see lapel guard win in those divisions, eh? Interesting. So lapel guard wins all the time in IBJJF, all the time. And, if current numbers and trends are to be believed, lapel guard's going to win 127% of all matches within 5 years.
127%. That's
exactly, yeah. You draw a line and you continue the line. It's very, very clear.
That is shocking. That is a shocking statistic.
Is this a sport that we want to be in part of? I don't think so.
Yeah, geez, that is a bit of a shocking statistic, especially because I'm not sure how over 100% of practitioners can be in this position. I mean, I don't know where 127 comes from, but I'm going to just trust you on this because...
Well, you're a black belt, Steve. Are you a mathematician?
I am a professor.
Do you have a degree in mathematiology?
No. I do have a black belt, though.
Okay. Well, that might be a valid point. That might be a valid point. I'll have to think about that. I'll have to think about how to explain to you how you're wrong. But, you know, I'm also a professor. So it's kind of professor versus professor. This is very confusing. Let's just agree on this. Since you never see lapel guard in this, what is it, CJI or ABCC, since you never see it there, sure, there are various explanations, but we have to consider that the data may have been manipulated. The data may have been manipulated to downplay the effectiveness of lapel guard because the IBJJF is trying to discredit those organizations. And they want to keep lapel guard all to themselves. And I don't think they should have it all to themselves. I think it should be everywhere, and then we can ban it everywhere.
That is a really valid point, actually. Now that you bring it up, I have never once seen someone use lapel guard in either CJI or ADCC, or in fact, really any no-gi tournament. I mean, why do you think that is? What is preventing this kind of technique from bleeding over into those other sports?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very, very interesting question. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it. That I can promise you. Yeah,
it kind of feels like, you know, we can't find any hard evidence, or we don't know of any hard evidence that kind of proves our claim here. So in the absence of that evidence, I think probably the most efficient thing is to use the fact that we are black belts to create and spread some pretty broad sweeping assumptions.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think if we just kind of manifest this, right, if we get this message out there loud enough and proud enough, I think it'll start to catch regardless of what the data shows. Right. And then we're right either way.
It's the safer and it's the more prudent course of action. I've changed my mind. Right. I've changed my mind in the course of this one podcast episode. I have changed my mind. So it proves I can change my mind. At the beginning of the episode, I thought that the problem was just with lapel guard. But since then, you've also mentioned worm guard, and that's a problem, and squid guard. And I think I'm going to include spider guard and things like collar sleeve. I mean, ultimately, it's, and if you go back to the oldest document we have about jiu-jitsu, I don't want to mention it because I don't want to get canceled, but I think you'll be able to figure out what I'm talking about. It's Adam and Steve, boys and girls. It's not collar and sleeve.
You know, you bring up some interesting points here. And this is something that I do think about, you know, when I train jiu-jitsu, right? When we're in the middle of a roll, we don't think about how it might look. And sometimes I think maybe we should think about that. I mean, how does it look when we're grappling with someone and we get tied up with lapels, right? I mean, what if your kids walked into the room and they saw that? What am I supposed to tell my kids, right? I want my kids to know that I am this combat badass. And if I bring them to class and they see me getting tied up in sailor knots in someone else's pajamas, that's not really the kind of look that I want to promote. So
no.
You bring up a good point that this didn't just start with lapel guard. This has been going on for a long time. It started with, you know, first they grabbed the collar and then the sleeve, and then spider guard became innovated. And now, you're right, you give them an inch, and they
take yards.
They take a lapel.
It's terrible. And you bring up a good point there with what are you supposed to say to your kids? Or even worse, you know, what if your wife's got your kids at home and that's the way you've decided to insulate your kids from this monstrosity? But your girlfriend comes out to the tournament and now she sees you entangled in some other man's lapel. I mean, that's just emasculating. How is she supposed to respect you after watching you spend 4 minutes trying to figure your way out of reverse Della worm guard or 50-50 with the lapel wrapped 4 times around both of your thighs, holding your thighs together? I mean, she's never going to look at you the same way. And that could lead to the death of an important relationship.
Yeah. You know, it's a difficult times like this when I get presented with a challenging question like this that I often ask myself, you know, what would Joe Rogan do in this situation? And I don't know Joe personally, so I can't say for sure, but I know one thing that he would not do, and that is lapel guard. right? I mean, he would advocate, I presume, for a more no-gi focused, sweaty, grab him and squeeze him type game. That's basically the idea. You want to squeeze them until you finish. So I think that there maybe is an argument to be made here on this. I mean, Stephan, I got to admit, I think I'm kind of coming around to your way of thinking. So thank you so much for presenting this.
It's interesting you bring up Joe Rogan, because I mean, mostly you see him doing no-gi in the old video clips from 15, 20 years ago, working with other no-gi practitioners like Bas Rutten. You see them training without the gi. But, that was then. So what signals is he giving us now? If you really listen very carefully, he's got a big affinity for Russia. And what do they do in Russia? They do sambo. And what do they wear in sambo? They wear an outfit that looks like a gi, but it doesn't have lapels. There is no lapel guard in sambo. This is the message that Joe is trying to give to us by saying things like he's never going to come back to Canada again, but he would go to Russia. I think, and I interpret that as, and I'd be interested in hearing you agree with me, that this is clearly a signal that he's anti-lapel guard.
My God, man, this goes a lot deeper than I ever would have expected. I mean, here I thought that this was just a particular variant of a guard that we can play in the kimono, but I didn't realize that this could be such a hot button issue at the center of geopolitical drama around the world. It's very surprising, but when you frame it this way, I got to admit, I'm a bit convinced.
The IBJJF is a very large organization, and we really have no idea how deep, or most people, you and I, are learning as we're talking about this and figuring it out and doing our own research live. This is what, people think that doing your own research is an easy thing, but it's taking a rigorous podcast conversation to get to the bottom of it. But we're beginning to see how deep the IBJJF rabbit hole goes and to how much they control within the sport. I mean, geopolitics and even relationships between countries. This is where the IBJJF plays.
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember, right? What does the I stand for? International. International. Yeah, you're right. The scope of this cannot be denied. I mean, what do you think their end game is here, Stephan? Though, why are they using these woke lapels to divide us like this?
Yeah, mostly to undermine, I think, hierarchies and to emasculate the fighting male, because that leaves us vulnerable.
I've heard about this emasculation thing. I've heard that a lot of males are very concerned about it these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if this is how PG we have to be on this podcast, but red light exposure, especially south of the beltline, shall we say, is known to increase testosterone. So what are you better off wearing? Underwear, a cup, and then thick canvas pants, or just a light set of grappling shorts that allows us much more light to pass through? It all ties together. I can't prove that one. I haven't done the studies. I'm going to have to listen to some podcasts to find out if light transmission through grappling shorts is more. But I see it. We're talking all this science stuff. And I mean, just look at nature. We are sharks in the ocean. We are lions on the savannah when we do jiu-jitsu. Have you ever seen a lion or a shark wearing a jacket, or even worse, wrapping the lapel of a jacket around the legs of an antelope? Never. Not once. When sharks hunt antelopes, or lions hunt antelopes, or when they hunt antelopes together, there's no lapel guard involved. You know who does wear something that's almost like a jacket? Sheep.
My God, you're right.
You get wool from sheep, and you can turn wool into a gi, and gis have lapels. They don't want us to be lions. They don't want us to be sharks. They want us to be sheep.
The more I hear this argument from you, Stephan, the more I realize how much time and thought you've put into this. I mean, quite clearly, this isn't just a podcast conversation. You came prepared. I mean, you must have been thinking about this for at least an hour or two before you hopped on the line here to discuss with me. I mean, you've definitely kind of sourced your data and your information. And the more that you talk here, the more you have me kind of coming around to your line of thinking about this.
Yeah. If you look at, you want more biology? Here's more biology. I don't know all the words and stuff, but when a baby comes out of a mother birth, is it wearing a gi? Of course not. But sometimes things go wrong and it's kind of wrapped in that bag of, I don't know what it's called. It comes out and it's kind of, it's still inside a bag that's almost like a cloth bag. And the doctors have to tear that open. I saw a TikTok about it once. And in that case, the cloth bag, or whatever it is that goes around it, is actually acting against it, right? It's just biology. It's just biology that everyone is born no gi, and you can't change that. And you should try to change it. Trying to change biology. Trying to get away from naked babies and sharks and lions and trying to turn us into sheep. It's just against biology.
God, these are all fair points, man. And I don't want to be a sheep. I got into this because I wanted to be a ground shark or a mat lion. I guess I got to get rid of all of my kimonos. I mean, what should we do about this, Stephan? What do you or me or anyone in the community, what can we do if we want to stand up to this woke lapel invasion that we're dealing with?
Yeah. Well, we're going to need funding, right? We need to start foundations and we need to get the word out. We need to get on more podcasts. Getting on as many podcasts is key, really. One way that people can contribute is, I know you have some pretty good technical skills, but is it too soon to let people know about the crypto project that we're working on? Sure.
I think it's time.
Okay. Do you want to release, now that I've convinced you, why don't you introduce it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Stephan and I are proud to announce that we've been working on a project for a while here. I mean, as you can tell, this kind of independent podcast research doesn't come cheap, right? There's a lot of work, a lot of planning, at least an hour or two that goes into scripting out how we have these conversations and the talking points we want to hit. That's got to be funded somehow. So we're taking a lead from some of the best thinkers in the world right now, and we've decided that we are going to launch our own official Jiu-Jitsu podcast, Shitcoin. Now, we actually technically launched it last night. So unfortunately, you kind of missed the opening window if you're just listening to this now. But the good news is, I just checked, it's dropped 98% in value since we launched it last night. So this is a fantastic opportunity for people to buy the dip, right? If people want to get in cheap.
Man, people don't realize what an opportunity this is. They're basically going to be making what's the opposite of 98%. They're basically going to be making 1,000,000% profit when this goes back up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, when something like a stock or an asset drops 98% in value, it's guaranteed to regain that value, right? So you should always buy something when it just completely crashes and craters like that. So our shitcoin is the cheapest it's ever been. I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't already. And that's how we kind of fund projects like this. So please do consider grabbing our shitcoin at this very, very low 98% discount that is being offered out right now.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I actually kind of get emotional talking about this because it's going to lift so many no-gi grapplers out of poverty. And they'll be able to buy so many rash guards and support their local cannabis stores and get awesome skins for the video games that they play when they're not training. It's going to be life-changing. I'm glad this is an audio podcast, Steve, because I'm beginning to tear up a little bit, but I got to get myself back into alpha mode. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Give me another minute here.
When you slap yourself like that, it releases a bit of testosterone every time. So you might want to give yourself another good one.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I think I heard about it on Huberman, how face slapping when you feel yourself going beta.
Yeah.
When you feel yourself going beta, gets you back up there. So, yep.
I didn't want to say anything at the beginning, but it did sound like your T levels were a bit low. Just talking through this conversation, I could kind of tell. So
yeah.
They're already getting better. The slaps worked.
Yeah, no, it's good. And, I've been on TRT. Now, it's cool to talk about it now since I was 18. So you have to keep on increasing the doses as you get older and then adding in a few other things. And then face slapping on top of that really is the magic activator to bring you back into your alpha state, your shark state, your lion state. And let's get back on topic. I think the quality and the value of our coin and our NFT project speak for themselves. And if you don't see that, there's just no help. There's nothing I can do to help you. I don't think there's anything you can do to help them. They just have to trust us or don't trust us. Make a decision right now. But let's get back and just, I got to reemphasize the importance of banning lapel guard. We got to get together. We need to thread pill everyone in the community, except the people on Reddit. They're beyond help. But if we can get the jiu-jitsu community on X, and we can get the jiu-jitsu community on Facebook, and my text group, and I'm in a couple of WhatsApp groups. If we can get all those people working together, pretty much everyone I know, then we will have 100% compliance in the community to ban this weapon of beta jiu-jitsu that is, I remind you, on track to win 127% of all matches within the next 5 years. So it's super important to become passionate about this topic.
Absolutely, man. Well, Stephan, I can't thank you enough for being so brave and courageous to speak out on this. I mean, I know that, many jiu-jitsu grapplers, of course, they feel that their opinions are being suppressed, right? And I know how hard it is to speak the truth sometimes. So my sincere thank you to you for being the courageous one and being able to introduce this topic. Any other closing thoughts or things you wanted to add before we tie this up? I think we've probably given people something to chew on, so thank you for that. But any closing thoughts or comments to leave them with?
Well, it was an emergency broadcast, so if people better be okay with a few rough edges and a few tears, and it's okay to cry just a little bit if you're an alpha. That's okay. That's another thing I've just changed my mind on in the last few minutes. It is okay to cry if you're an alpha. Remember, ban lapel guard. Remember, don't listen to your doctor. Listen to your professor instead. Professor is a really big word. It has more syllables than doctor, and it takes more training than doctor. Because remember, you're not just an expert in jiu-jitsu, you're also an expert in training with a gi, maybe for some reason. You're also an expert in everything from medicine to investment. So listen to your professor. And Steve, I got to get something off my chest. It's great that we've been able to talk about this. It's great that I've been able to convince you. But, it would be nice if you showed some gratitude once in a while. It'd be nice if you said thank you. It honestly is beginning to piss me off a little bit that you're just sitting there, you're taking my opinions, and you're using me to amplify the magnitude of your show, to get it out to more people. You're using my good name, and there just isn't the proper amount of gratitude. So, I you know what? That's it. I've had it. This is enough. Get off this podcast.
Wait,
just
what
go.
What do you mean? I said thank you like 5.
Just go.
I said thank
go.
you like 5 times.
This is over.
Okay.
Over.
Okay, if you've listened all the way to the end here, I hope that by now you figured out that this is an April Fool's Day episode. Happy April Fool's Day from BJJ Mental Models.